Okay, let's move on to the last problem I asked you to try to solve for homework. Problem 4 on page 147, which is going to reveal to you that Clash of Wills is not just this abstract, made-up structure that some mathematician or philosopher dreamed up, but actually has real-world applications. Marisha, read problem 4.
In the rural community where I live, falling trees and lightning cause a fair number of electrical power failures. Do tell. When these occur, someone phones the electric company to report the outage, and it is fixed within a few hours. Every time I have called the electric company, I have been told that someone has already reported the outage and it will be repaired. Since the call is a long-distance one, I have felt that I have wasted my money. The other night we had another power failure, and as I lay on my bed staring into the darkness, it occurred to me that in deciding whether to phone the company, I was playing a Clash of the Wills. Assuming that only one other person has been affected by the power failure, and thus that he is my opponent, represent my situation as a Clash of Wills.
Awesome. Okay. And if you live out in the country like we do, you know this is true. Now, of course, it's a 1980s problem. Resnick wrote this book in the 80s. We don't have long-distance calls anymore. However, imagine that you had to pay an additional amount of money to call in order to report the outage. That's what he's talking about there, in case you didn't know. Okay, think about this in terms of my preferences. Okay, I would most prefer the outcome that the other calls, I don't. Because then the power would get fixed and I don't have to pay any money for the call. However, my next preferred outcome would be that I call and the other doesn't. That's preferred to both call. The reason is because the power will get fixed one way or the other if I call and the other doesn't, or if both call, right? I will have to pay either way if I call or we both call. But if we both call, that will have an added less of preference for me because I will feel like I wasted my money. Okay, so this has power gets fixed. That's positive. I get charged on both of these, but in addition, I have the displeasure of feeling like I wasted my money, or at least I don't feel like I wasted my money here. Finally, the worst outcome would be if neither calls. So if we rank these in terms of my preferences, I'd most prefer that. I'd second prefer this. I'd third prefer this. And last, I'd prefer that. And now if we rank this in terms of my neighbor's, the other's preferences, you're going to get exactly the same. The other would prefer that I call, he or she doesn't. Would second prefer that he or she calls, I don't, for the same reason as I preferred that. Finally, would prefer that both calls, and would least prefer that neither calls, because then the power doesn't get fixed, and that's the worst of all. 2, 1, 0, 1. Now let's represent what we've got here in terms of a prisoner's dilemma, in terms of a Clash of Wills. We have the other, and we have me. We have the choices of call or don't. Call or don't. Okay, if we both call, that's going to be a payoff of 0, 0 for both of us. If I call and the other does not, that's going to pay a payoff of 1 for me and 2 for the other. I call, the other doesn't. He or she, I call, he or she doesn't. 2 for my neighbor, 1 for me. If I don't call and my neighbor calls, well, that's the payoff for me of 2 and for my neighbor of 1. And finally, if we both don't call, we wind up in -1, the worst possible outcome for us. And you'll see that here we have again the classic structure of the Clash of Wills.